I mean, word on the street is he's really wowing at camp again this year. And she was staring at me from across the room this whole time, and it made me really uncomfortable.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is episode 10 of Player Normal Activity. I am your host, Craig Reith, and thank you for joining me as always here. Today we have a great guest in the fantasy community. You have seen her all over the place. Kelly Singh is a fantasy football contributor for Women of Fantasy Football. She's also a contributor and podcast creator for The Commish, where she hosts Extra Points with Kelly in Phoenix that you can find on whatever your favorite podcatcher is. She does marketing for Trophy Smack, and she is all over the betting content on Twitter and different sites. I'm sure you've seen her on different YouTube shows, but she does betting content for Team Rise or Fall, In Between Media. And you can find all of it over on her Twitter handle at Kelly in Phoenix. Kelly, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm so great. Thank you for inviting me to do this. When you brought it up, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I totally want to do this.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. You get to get a little bit of football and another little aspect of life, talking about stuff that a lot of people have interest in that people just don't talk about as much out there. It's a good way to get to know people in a little bit different of an atmosphere. But of course, we start off our show here talking about a player of the guest choice, and your player that you chose near and dear to the Phoenix sort of area now there is Rondale Moore. So what can you tell me about what you're feeling about Rondale Moore in 2022?
Well, yeah, it's more than a feeling, Keith. I kill me.
I love a good joke and I love a good pun. So
it's actually a terrible pun, but that's okay.
Sometimes those are the best.
I fell in love with Rondale Moore when I heard he was coming to the Cardinals, when he was drafted. It's like, shoot, this is amazing. That kid killed it at Purdue, and I just knew it was going to be amazing. And then I went to camp and watched him play at training camp, and they had him doing he was receiving kicks on special teams. He was catching the slot ball, or however you guys say that thing. And it was just like a thing of beauty because he's small, but he's mighty and he just dashes through. But while the season started off with a bang, it started to taper down, and he got fewer and fewer opportunities, and that was kind of disappointing, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't know how you felt about him last year, but this year there's loads of promise going into this year.
Yeah, Rondale is one of those receivers that, if you look into the Devy stuff or sort of pay attention to prospects years in advance, of course, because of that freshman year that he had at Purdue, he just blew up and everyone was in love with him. But of course, the longer people play, it seems, the more nitpicky people get. And there's, a big thing that people love to point to, which is his size, which you can understand. But I mean, to your point, his versatility at Purdue and what he was able to do there, and just his physical skill set at someone that size. I mean, he has speed, burst, agility, strength. Anyone that's paid attention to Rondale Moore leading up to the draft last year saw those videos of how much he was able to squat and lift. The guy is just powerful. And I was excited when he got drafted to Arizona. I was able to get him in the latter half of the first or the early second in a lot of drafts. Like you said, the year started off great and then it tapered off. But his versatility, I think, is just going to be one of the keys to utilizing him in the NFL. And I do think that's coming yet. But looking at this makeup of the Arizona team, they added another big name wide receiver that, for now seems to push him back down the depth chart a little bit. But do you have any feeling for how he's going to be utilized this year in Arizona?
I mean, word on the street is he's really wowing at camp again this year. They hold mini camp, and it's a lot cooler. I believe they're holding it in Flagstaff or Prescott, well, North. And word on the street is he's out there killing it again. I know we have Hollywood Brown now, and I'm also a huge Ravens fan, so it's pretty exciting to get Brown. I feel like Brown is for the long ball. He's there to catch that Hail Mary, and it's either going to be like a super long 50-yard bomb where he runs out of bounds, or it's going to be just a Hail Mary touchdown. That's the kind of player that I see Hollywood Brown. Then we have Hopkins suspended for a good deal of the season. We've lost Kirk. We've lost, I can't remember if we lost Green or not, but even though we've gained a superstar, it's a lot less crowded, especially at the start of this season right now. And I visualize Moore, just like I saw him at camp at the start of last season, running up the slot and catching it, and then maybe going like 10 yards. I mean, he had one touchdown, which was great last season, but I don't see him as that kind of player. I see him as, you know, just catching that 10-yard pass, getting the first down, or maybe it's getting a new set of downs. I can't find my words. And keeping us alive, because he has great hands, he has great speed and agility. So I can see them being utilized in these different ways. And I think it's going to benefit the Cardinals tremendously.
Now, you know, sort of the elephant in the room this whole offseason for Arizona was the drama, whether made up to prove a point and get a contract or real in some other way with quarterback Kyler Murray. You're much more attuned down there than I am, and you hear rumors and completely unfounded stuff on the internet every day. So do you feel that there's any real truth to him being disgruntled, or was it more of a play for him to try to get that contract and, you know, maybe a player like Marquise Brown that he knows from college on the team to help him out more?
I don't think it's that he's disgruntled. I think it was just a play to get more money. Right now, my vibe is that the Cardinals are waiting on the Ravens to decide what they're going to pay Lamar, and the Ravens are waiting on the Cardinals to decide what they want to pay Kyler. Even though they're not the same caliber necessarily, Lamar's a much better quarterback, I think, than Kyler is, but they're similar in their age and their experience. And so both of them are out there trying to get that bag, you know. And I feel like once one of them moves, then the other one's going to have a precedent to point back to and be like, this is what we're going to pay you. Is that fair? No. But I think that's kind of what's going on right now. And I mean, there's the holdouts and the similarities between the two just make me feel like that's the case. And I don't see it as that Murray's disgruntled necessarily.
Well, and that's how the NFL works. You know, you see guys just hold out, and there's that game of chicken, or like that Spider-Man meme where they're pointing at each other, just waiting for the first one to make the move. And, you know, Lamar, if you're waiting on him, is in a unique situation because I believe he works as his own agent. So who really knows what he's thinking? Sometimes with these, you know, large agency groups, you can get a better handle on that. Lamar is certainly a wild card, and if they're holding out for him, they might be waiting a while to see how that all plays out, because it kind of feels like he's betting on himself going into this year again. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But either way, I think they're both going to get paid.
I do know that Kyler has gone to minicamp. It is mandatory, and he's there playing. They're at the start with the non-mandatory warm-ups. I believe he missed the first one, and that was probably like to make a point. They were optional warm-ups, and now it's the media. What am I trying to say? Mini camp mandatory. There's a lot of M's there, and he is there playing.
So with another M thrown in here, with Moore, he was, I think, in PPR leagues like wide receiver 61 last year or somewhere in there. Where do you kind of see his feeling? Because as much as I like him, I don't think he's going to be a true alpha number one wide receiver. He probably, to me, tops out as a second wide receiver on the team. So for Rondale Moore, you know, as much as I like him, I think with his skill set and, you know, his size, that does give him some limitations long term in the NFL, and he probably doesn't end up as that alpha number one wide receiver. But I do think he has potential to be a number two wide receiver on a team. And just in terms of assuming he's going to be there in Arizona with some of these pieces around him and Kyler, long term, sort of where do you see his ceiling at for fantasy purposes?
I see him kind of in that same spot as a wide receiver too. I do think he's going to get a lot more action this season, even with Hollywood Brown on the team. I just see him really getting the attention of coaches and players alike. They know he can do it. He missed the last 3 games of last season because he had an ankle injury. So, I mean, that could be part of it. Maybe he just wasn't up to par and was playing on an injury. I know a lot of kids will do that when they're in the big leagues. So knowing that, I think going into this season, he is poised and ready and healthy and actually feels like he has a role on the team. Because like I mentioned, I see him and Marquise Brown as very different roles, and he's not fighting for time against Hopkins either. So right now, I would have him drafted as a wide receiver too. I have seen him going at the very end of drafts, not the very end, but gosh, probably like 20th round or so. So depending on how many rounds you have, most of mine are like 31 or 36 or something like that. And I'm seeing him go there in the early 20 rounds. So I feel like that's a great bargain. I would pick him up for sure because he's definitely going to get playing time, especially when Hopkins is out.
AJ Green, I believe he is still there, but you're talking AJ Green's going to be 34 this year. And as great as he was for so many years, you saw he just isn't a full-time player anymore.
Right.
And he's certainly very different than Green or Hopkins. Even if they are on the field, he's a completely different element.
Yep. Agreed. I was going to say Green was even utilized more so, I felt, for a touchdown, for more end zone work, I feel like, than just passing in general. He was more like a utility player that we mentioned that more as more of a utility player. But yeah, he's much different, I think, than Moore. Different skill sets.
With adding him or adding Brown to Moore along with Kyler, Kyler's a dynamic quarterback that can make plays with his feet. Both Brown and Moore, despite being very different players, they have that speed, that quickness, and that burst that really could be another level of explosiveness. And you can never have too many of those guys. They saw that in the playoffs against the Rams. No matter how good your offense is at times, you can always have more, and you always need more weapons to be able to just go out there if you get into a dogfight and just be throwing it around the field. So I'm excited for the Arizona team a lot. They've made some nice moves on that offense. The defense, I think, is younger than it has been, but certainly has a lot of promise. And I think they're going to be contending for that division against the Rams. The Rams made some moves too, but they also lost some players, and it's not just going to be a repeat of last year, I think. So
yeah,
I know you're excited down there in Arizona for them. Where do you see the Cardinals going this year?
Gosh, I would love to see them competing. I have heard the O-line is lackluster right now, so that could be a big problem. They need a strong O-line because Kyler is not that tall.
Yep.
And that's something he needs to be able, just the fact, to see down the field. That's a fact.
Yeah.
It's not something that you can overlook. So I'm hopeful that they get it together, that they can protect their quarterback, and we get to utilize these weapons that are in place. Because if so, then they are definitely contenders and not a team to take lightly.
I'm in agreement with you in that I think Rondale's probably being underdrafted a little bit right now. When you sort of look at where he finished last year, despite missing those games, that wide receiver 61 or so, there's a lot of room to move upward if that offense continues to grow. And not that he was the focus of attention, but he'll be even less of a focus this year for opposing defenses with those other weapons there to pay attention to. And I think he's a sneaky good play. Thanks for picking him to go over. He's definitely a controversial player. A lot of that leading up to the draft last year, but he's a guy that's proven people wrong before in college, and I think he's up for the challenge again here in the NFL.
I agree.
As we move on from the football field to the 40, and I want to thank everyone who's watching this on the premiere or listening after the fact. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe over on YouTube. Please leave a comment if you have any thoughts. Tell us what you think about Rondale Moore. I'm always following up there in the comments. Or if you have any questions or things about this next part that we're leading into here. Of course, we're going into our paranormal topic. And Kelly had a very interesting one that we haven't had on the show yet, so I'm super excited for her to go over this. But she is talking about communicating with the dead and the idea of mediumship. So, Kelly, take it away.
Yes, this is a topic that I'm super into. It very much interests me from a child on. I always felt like someone was talking to me. And I think a lot of children and a lot of people have this experience where maybe they hear their name or they hear a phone ring or like a lot of those type of experiences. And then you look and nobody's there.
Yep.
That happened to me a lot when I was a child. Moving forward, I was in my 20s, and dozens of times I had been told by like tarot card readers, palm readers, things like that, whether it was a professional situation or at a fair, but everybody would be like, well, you know that you have the gift. And I just laugh. I'm like, okay, whatever. I didn't really pay too much attention to that. And then I saw this lady at a Chamber of Commerce get together. And she was staring at me from across the room this whole time. And it made me really uncomfortable, but also very interested at the same time. She approached me and said, I'm supposed to talk to you. I'm just like, okay, hi, I'm Kelly. I'm, giving her my elevator pitch for my marketing agency. And she's like, no, I'm supposed to talk to you because you're supposed to be embracing your gifts. I'm completely weirded out at this point because I've heard it so many times and just didn't necessarily want to believe it. Even though it was something I was very interested in, I didn't want to believe that maybe I could communicate with the dead, whether it be through hearing things or seeing things or just a gut feeling, which is most of the time what I think. It just really weirded me out. I went to this woman's house and we started talking. We went through a bunch of exercises. And I tell you right now, my grandmother was there. We were meditating. We were going through this whole exercise. She was just there in my mind's eye. And we were very, very close. And I got up and I ran out of the lady's house. I was like really freaked out. It just freaked me out. So I guess long story short, I still am a big believer in signs. I look for signs everywhere. I listen to the universe. And I know that sounds very cheesy and very hokey to a lot of people, but when I have listened and been receptive, been open to receiving these messages, whether they're from the dead or a higher power or just an energy, I've found that my life is much more successful and happier. So an example of these signs, my dad passed away in 2015 and we played golf together. That was something we did together. We played fantasy sports together. He was my best friend. And when he died, I was so upset and so sad. But I was the last person he had called for before he passed away. So it just kind of went to show what our bond was like. And when I went on a golf trip, I guess it was a couple months after he had passed, I was taking a picture of the ocean because it was in California, and this bird feather flew right in front of my camera. And it wasn't the first time I had seen a bird feather. There had been bird feathers. I had been finding them in weird places like the seat of my car since my dad had passed. And so now every time I see a bird feather, I just know it's my dad communicating with me. And then the other kind of cool thing that happens is every now and then, and it's usually when I'm going through a very stressful period, I will wake up in the middle of the night to hear birds singing. And I find that to be really odd that there are birds singing at night. And I know that there are nightingales. And then people have told me that here in Phoenix that birds get confused because we have a lot of light pollution. But it doesn't happen every night. It happens I don't know, a couple times a year maybe. So when I do hear them, I take it as a sign and I take it very seriously to just consider whatever it is that I'm going through. So I think the moral of the story would be to just take a moment, whether you think you have a gift or don't have a gift, but be open to what is around you with the signs by listening. Sometimes even when you touch something or when you see something that reminds you of what you're going through, pay attention to it and act on it.
It's super interesting to me. The concept of just energy and openness, I've thought about that stuff a lot. I can't say I've had any experiences that I know of off the top of my head, but to your point about when you were younger and you'd hear stuff, I think, and this isn't an original thought by any means, but I think kids are a lot more open to just the wonders of the world and different possibilities for reality. As unfortunately, a lot of us, I think, as we grow, we just get out of it ourselves, or becoming an adult takes some of it out of us. Just that mindfulness to be open and be aware of things around you and don't be closed off to it, I think is just a great idea in general. But then, taking that to the next level, spiritualness and all that sort of stuff. And I haven't had any experiences like that at all. I know other people have talked to me about it just in my personal life passing, about those moments or those, what some people might call coincidences. But when it happens enough, is it really a coincidence anymore? Right. There's just so much of that I think we close ourselves off to. So that's great that you're still open to that and being able to experience that sort of stuff.
Yeah, 100%. And it's something that it brings me peace even. You just reminded me about having an experience. I was talking to my aunt about all this. We had a long road trip together. She also believes that she has some sort of ability to at least be sensitive to the universe. And I was telling her when I was a teenager, once I had car trouble and this guy pushed my car with his truck off the off-ramp and into a safe space. And he looked like I guess looking back, he looked like my dad, but younger, like in the 70s. And then another time I had gotten in a wreck and I was dead. I was alive. I was almost dead. And they're putting me in the helicopter and I look up and I swear to you, it was the same guy, like this trucker cap on with the hair curled out and a mustache, and it looked like my dad. And I thought, wouldn't that be crazy, like in some alternate universe, that my dad was there to protect me, but it was my younger dad and not my dad now. Like, it was such a mind-blowing experience to look back on when I started putting different pieces together of times when I've had these experiences or I needed help. One, that it was like this same helpful angel person that was there when I needed help, but also that it looked like my dad from like the 70s.
Well, so, again,
so crazy.
Just another like one of those coincidences, but if that stuff continually happens and you keep getting these signs, maybe it just isn't a coincidence anymore and it really is something for you. And if that's what you get out of it, I think that's just a great reminder for life to be open to what life gives you. Don't ignore it and live your life and get what you can out of it. One of the things I was thinking of when you mentioned this stuff, because you talked about when you were much younger and then more of in your adult life, did you ever have any sort of like experimentation with things like Ouija boards or other devices to try to communicate with the dead? That people have differing opinions on it. Those talking boards or spirit boards, those are from the 1800s or farther back. So have you done anything like that?
I have. I've had very good luck with pendants, pendulums, and utilizing intuition. Those yes, no questions that's actually worked really well for me. I've found a lot of lost items using that method. If anybody wants to look it up, it's utilizing, if you're looking for something lost, if you have, like, I use my grandmother's necklace and I would just hold it in front of me and ask it questions. And it was a pair of earrings I was looking for her, for instance, and I was able to find them using this pendulum method. Another thing I've done, I have used Ouija boards. I find them incredibly terrifying. And I mean, I am torn between, there's definitely an element of being able to let something negative, if you believe in the spiritual realm, and something negative wants to come in, it's going to use whatever methods it can to come in. But I will say, we were, gosh, how old were we? Like 12. and we're asking it, oh, who am I going to marry? It's my friends
Nope.
and I. And all it did, it just went to a J. And that was it. I didn't really know anybody with a J name at that. I'm like 12. But I'm not kidding you. Every single boy I dated in high school's name started with a J. I married a man whose name started with a J. We're not married anymore. But I thought it was so crazy when one of my girlfriends, we were still friends at this time in our early 20s, and she's like, remember that? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is so wild. So wild. But it also told me I was going to die when I was 72. And I was going to fall down the stairs at Turf Paradise, which is our horse track. And I love going to the races. So anybody out there that still knows me when I'm 72, please don't let me climb the stairs.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, I've talked to people in my own personal life that use this stuff all the time, and yeah, same sort of thing. Like it was once in middle school, I was at a party and we used it, and I was there for a couple questions, and I asked it one, which was just like, how do you spell my mom's name? Because it is a weird spelling or whatever. And it spelled it out correctly. And I know I wasn't doing it. So
And you're like,
was that someone else that knew it? Or I don't think anyone there did. I can't say they didn't, but it was enough for me to be like, yeah, I'm good. And I went to something else at the party. And that's been it for me. But, to your point, if you're using that stuff and there is anything to it, once you open the door, you don't have control of what comes through the door. And you're playing a game of chance really on what you run into. So yeah, I have some trepidation, whatever, using that. My kids have asked me, I don't know where they heard about them. Like, oh, can we get one of those? I'm like, no, we're good. We don't need to have that in the house or anything. We don't need to.
Kind of, it feels like you might have like an Annabelle in your house. Once you have one of those boards, it's like, can you get rid of it? Will it come back?
Yeah, when you're keeping the stuff contained to yourself and your own life experiences and not just introducing a foreign object of any sort into it, you have a little bit more control, it feels. But yeah, that's a great story. Thanks for coming on to share that. I'm glad to hear that that's been able to continue and help you throughout life, because I think that's the most important part of that story is, not only is there that sense of, it seems like your father around you all the time, but it's helping you out for the positive. And not much more you could ask for from a spiritual realm than to get that.
That's right. And that could just be how I choose to view it. But like I said, the more I'm open to these messages and these signs, the more I feel like I'm succeeding in it. And that's a good feeling.
Yep. I mean, that's all what we're sort of getting out of life or trying to get out of life here is, all make our mark and spend our time and be as positive as we can. And if you're getting help doing that and it's working for you, I'm glad to hear it.
Yay. Well, hopefully nobody thinks I'm like totally crazy pants. But if they do, you know what? I don't care.
Well, there's people I'm sure that think I'm crazy for even talking to people about this stuff, but I find all of it just completely fascinating. And again, haven't really had anything myself. Maybe I will someday, and I can come on here and do a solo show or something. But I really do appreciate you coming on here to talk about Rondale Moore and share your story about your having of the gift or communicating with the dead. And why don't you let everyone know again where they can find you?
Yeah, I have endless amount of projects going right now. So the best way to find me is just to follow me on Twitter at Kelly in Phoenix. And you'll see, like I said, an endless amount of things going on. Most recently on Extra Points, I just interviewed Adam Rank. So that was episode number 6. If you like a good interview, he's a great storyteller. And normally my 10 or 15 minute podcast went over an hour, and it was just a really great opportunity. So if you like interviews, I encourage you to check that out.
All right. Well, thank you again, Kelly, and thank you to everyone watching or listening as well. We're back every Friday at noon Eastern with a new episode. And remember, everyone, whether you're interested in Rondale Moore or the Rougarou, we are going to have you covered here on Player Normal Activity. Thank you again, everyone, and we will see you next time.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you'd like more great fantasy football content like this, please click the link down below here.